book marks out as different from other titles is the way you try and help us understand society and daily life in the period through the sorts of words that were being used. I wonder, there's a few areas I'd like to discuss specifically, but before we do that, I wonder, there's a sort of general questions. You talked about the poetry that we have, the surviving poems that we have, The Wanderer, The Ruin, and Beowulf, and things like that. Do you get the sense that the speakers of Old English were particularly poetic sorts, or is that simply a reflection of the survival of the corpus that we have?
I suspect that's more a reflection of the corpus we have left. I mean, if everyday speech wasn't recorded as much as it is in our, in society today, we have all kinds of different types of speech being recorded and shared, like on social media and on the news, and just like video recordings of people talking. And so if you're looking back at the year 1000, what we get recorded is what people decided was worth recording, which was quite a process to actually record words. So yeah, what we're going to get is homilies, maybe religious texts, poetry, chronicles, but not so much just what people spoke in everyday conversations. One of the things I refer to in the book is when I'm trying to talk about secular professions, and what we don't have very many words for describing the secular professions, like outside of the church. And there's this kind of student dialogue that has survived that a Latin teacher wrote for his students. It has Latin, but it also has Old English translations of the Latin in it. And it has phrases like, well, what do you do, farmer? And the farmer says, I have to get up and work and go to the fields, and, my Lord is going to be mad at me if I don't do it. But it's the sort of conversation that you get in a language textbook where, when I took Spanish in school, we'd have these conversations that felt very kind of outside of what normal people would be saying to each other, but it was a learning method. It feels like everything that's written down is perhaps, it's written down for a reason, and it isn't just reflecting what people say in everyday life.
I got it. You're talking about Aelfrich's colloquies there. Yeah. So they're kind of one little way, and just a little scintilla of insight there. What about humour? Can we see how they express humour through the writings that you've seen?
Yeah. Well, humor is another difficult thing, because what we find funny today might not have been considered funny then. There's nothing that says specifically like this was satire, or this was a joke book, or something like that. But I think one thing that we can say for pretty certain that it was supposed to be funny on some level are the riddles of the Exeter book, which are from the 10th century. And there's a series of riddles. They don't have solutions, and they're objects or things speaking in the first person, and you're meant to guess what that object is. And there's a lot of double entendre with those. There's perhaps different ways you could read them that could be sort of naughty or not naughty, and that's some of the humor that we can see in Old English.
Okay, and then before we move on, the title of your book it includes the word hoard. What is a word hoard?
A word hoard. Word hoard is a word that appears 7 times in Old English. It's always used in poetry, and it describes a poet's stockpile of words and phrases that they would draw on. So if you're a poet and you're reciting from memory, it would be useful to have some words and phrases back of your head to sort of pull out and throw in while you're trying to tell a long story. And so that's the idea of what the word hoard is having